Welcome to the Garden Angelist, where we talk about flowers, veggies, and all the best dirt. I'm Dee Nash from Guthrie, Oklahoma.
And I'm Carol Michael from Indianapolis, Indiana. We call ourselves Garden Angelists because we are evangelists for gardening. We love gardening and we want others to love it too.
We are also authors and invite you to check out our books, including mine, The 2030 Something Garden Guide, and No Fuss, Down and Dirty Gardening 101 for anyone who wants to grow stuff.
And my books, including Potted and Pruned, Homegrown and Handpicked, and Seeded and Sodded, my trilogy of gardening humor, and my new book, Creatures and Critters, Who's in My Garden. You can ask for any of our books at your favorite bookstore or find them online wherever books are sold.
Speaking of online, you can also find us as the Garden Angelists on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and Pinterest. And we'd love for you to join our Facebook group, the Garden Angelists Garden Club.
And now on to this week's episode. Hello, Dee.
Hey, Carol, how is it going? You got some cold weather, girl.
We had a freeze earlier this past week.
Is that a little late for you guys?
It is a little late. They always say don't plant before Mother's Day around here, and this freeze took place on Saturday morning, the day before Mother's Day. So, all those new gardeners.
Yeah, if they put out tomatoes, they're going to go back and buy some more.
Yep.
Yeah, buy some more tomatoes. It's okay. It happens to everybody at least once.
Right. But it was the coldest ever recorded day in May in Indianapolis.
Huh. Well, there's still some stuff that you can plant and grow right now, even though it's chilly, right?
Oh yeah, you can still the lettuce, the radishes, turnips, beets, spinach, onions, peas, none of that was bothered. Cabbage, none of that was bothered because that all withstands cool temperatures.
And also you have a plant blooming now that I had blooming 3 weeks ago.
Yes, Lily of the Valley, which always blooms around Mother's Day here, was in full bloom, and I picked a nice little bunch of it and brought it inside on Sunday.
That's nice. I don't have enough plants yet, but maybe next year since my friend gave me some plants.
You know what I'm doing with the annuals that I have bought? Because the greenhouse has just been so busy that I had to buy annuals thinking that I wouldn't get any, which I kind of did last year, but I didn't have the freezes. So I put them all in the bed of my pickup truck. I pull it out in the daytime and I can water them.
Oh.
And then I pull it in at night into the garage. And so it's still in the 40s here this morning, so I haven't pulled it out yet.
Yeah, because you don't want to pull it out until it's at least 45, 48, 49, 50, really 50.
Yeah.
So it's cold here too for us. We got down to 44 the other night, which is a little too cold. And I went out and looked at all my tomatoes that are in their bags and they were all fine. Right now, while we're speaking, it's only 52 degrees here. It is normally about 80 this time of year.
Yeah, it's 46 here. But you know what? There's like this, you look at the forecast and, we're not supposed to talk about the weather, but it looks like they're going to flip a switch on Thursday and suddenly it's going to be warm and nice. And, I'm going to give it a couple of more days for the soil to warm up really nice and good. And then I think it's planting time.
There you go. I think it's going to get warmer here at the end of the week, but it looks like we have a whole week of rain and maybe some thunderstorms. And what's important about this is we normally get this week in April, usually right after April 19th. And you know why I remember that?
Because I don't know why you remember that.
Because that's the day of the Alfred P. Murrah bombing.
Oh.
The bombing in Oklahoma. Because I worked downtown as a legal assistant back then. And I remember this so well. And I was thinking about it yesterday when I was out for my walk. And it was quite chilly when I was out walking. I was thinking about how it rained the entire week after the bombing, which made things very difficult for people trying to recover.
Right. It
bodies
would.
And stuff. It would, but it also seemed like God was crying. And so we always get a week like that in April, but this time we're getting it in May, which is kind of weird, but that's okay. And you also talked a little bit about emerald towers, or you were going to talk about emerald towers. Let's talk about emerald towers because I sowed seeds for it too.
So this is a variety of basil that I grew last summer from one little trial seedling, and I loved it. So I planted 12 seedlings, and they're doing pretty well. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to give some of these back to the local greenhouse and tell them to grow them because I think they'll find them very good. I'm going to get some for my sister. And I started thinking about all the places I was going to take this Emerald Towers. And I decided I better sow some more seeds. So I sowed another 12.
Oh, good for you. Okay, so I put out probably 8 plants of it, and I'm only growing Emerald Towers and Siam Queen Basil this year. That's my plan anyway. And well, that's not true because Proven Winners is sending me an Amazel, which I also like.
Yes.
And what the reason we like Emerald Towers is it doesn't get mildewy, right?
Oh, I didn't see any mildew. I grew it and Amazel basil, both. Neither one got mildew. Amazel basil flowered a little bit before Emerald Towers. Emerald Towers just kept growing straight up with no flowers. Lots of pretty leaves.
I'll be excited to see that. I've actually tasted it because it's the one that I took all my seedlings and I kind of pricked them all and, tore off the top leaves and I put it on my pizza last week that we made because we've been making pizza here. And they're doing really well, and they're doing well in spite of the cooler weather. And I'm excited to see them. Our friend, we better talk about that later. Okay, keep going.
You gonna leave people in suspense?
I am. We'll talk about that later because I don't want to take away from our plants and veggies and all of that this time because we overtalked last time.
Okay, so here's the quote. I am always more interested in people than plants. Nature doesn't make gardens. People make gardens. And the story of a garden is always the story of a person. Monty Don of Gardener's World.
Isn't that appropriate? Because Gardener's World, which people can get on BritBox, if you subscribe to BritBox on your Roku or Apple TV or whatever you use, Gardener's World has been having some trouble making all of their shows this year because they haven't been able to travel at all in England, but they've been taking videos from all of their viewers. And they had a guy this week from North Carolina.
I saw that. And you know, I'm all about making my video and sending it to Gardener's World. So I'm wanting the garden to flesh out a little bit more. And then I'm going to send a video in. Maybe, I'll be one of the ones chosen from the thousands they are getting. We'll see.
Maybe so. And my daughter Claire said to me yesterday when I was watching the end of it, we were giggling because he was trying to tell people how to film in landscape. So turn your phone on its side, people, if you decide to send in a video, because that's the full screen, just like on your TV set. And they've been trying to do this for weeks and people keep still sending it the other way. So Claire was like, we should do a video of you. And I said, well, I could do a video with all my tomato plants and all their bags. That's kind of fun.
Oh, you should do it. You should do it.
Yeah, he won't pick me, but that's okay. So what is our flower topic for today?
Actually, our flower topic today is not a flower, but I thought we should talk about houseplants because I've seen a lot of questions on Facebook about, can I take my houseplants outside?
Yes, you can.
But not right yet.
Okay. Well, not at your house.
No.
And you could take them here, but I would wait a week or two. Wait until it gets nice and warm. But don't put them out in the sun.
Oh, no.
Because those houseplants have been living not large. They've been living small inside your house. And they haven't been getting much light. So they don't want full sun. And I actually made that mistake last summer. I stuck a jade plant outside. And I thought I had it in enough shade on my deck, but I did not, and it got sunburned.
Yeah.
It felt bad.
And the leaves start to get brown and stuff, and they suffer.
They do suffer, so I had to bring it back indoors because I didn't have anywhere to put it. So do you take a lot of yours outside?
Some years I do, and some years I don't. Last summer, I did take them all outside, and that's where I want to talk about watering.
Yes.
Because I had them up kind of against the house. It's on the north side on the patio. And so I would water my containers freely with all the annuals and stuff. And then I, wave the hose over at those and water them. And I think I was over watering the house plants.
It would be easy to do. They're in a smaller pot. By their very nature, houseplants don't need as much water as plants outdoors, and they're not sitting in full sun. So that would be easy to do.
Right. And I think I hate to admit this, but a couple of the snake plants, they sort of have, the way they're developed, they have like an area that can hold water, and water would get in there and they started to rot. So you got to be
Oh,
really
no.
careful. You want to be as deliberate watering them outside as you are inside, if that makes sense.
Right. And inside in the summer, I only water my houseplants every couple of weeks because in the winter, they're dried out by the heat that you have on. In the summer, you don't have that on. You have on air conditioning. And so it's not the same. It doesn't dry things out. And you don't want to water them as often. And I actually just talked about that with my best friend the other day, Amy, because she was overwatering her aglaonema.
Easy to do.
Easy, very easy to do. So don't take them out until it's good and summery outside. It has to be, you got to have temps that are lows in the 50s.
At night.
Never lower than 45. Yeah, at night. And put them in the shade, some shade. And you might consider a theater type arrangement. I have a theater. You're building one, aren't you?
If I can ever get to a building supply store in a safe manner, I would like to build a theater to put some of my houseplants in. And I'm not going to take all of them out this year. I've decided that that's kind of foolish because there's some I have a few African violets. I just don't think they belong outside ever.
I don't think they do either. Only in their native habitat.
And I didn't take that out last year.
So our friends Karen and John that we Zoom with every Monday night, they actually built a raised bed during this quarantine time. And what they did is they just called up the building supply place, told them exactly what they needed, and they delivered it to their house.
I probably could do that.
No hands were touched.
I probably don't need that much.
Well, they only built one raised bed, Carol. It's about the same.
I'm kind of hoping that somewhere in my garage or up in the attic, I've got some spare wood I can use. We'll see.
Well, we'll see. Everybody wait breathlessly to see if she builds a theater.
The other thing we should say is if you have a beautiful prized flower pot, and I know you tend to get more beautiful flower pots than I do, that's probably not something that you want to haul outside because so much can happen outside. Can get knocked over by wild animals. It could fade. You could drop it. So if you've got a really nice container, I'd leave that inside.
Yeah. And those heavy pots you have, there are these great dollies that are made for hauling around pots. There's also an appliance dolly, but I use I have a pot dolly that has a curved back.
Yes.
So the pot sits on it. And that's how I move a lot of mine. If my son isn't here to help me. And I have a great big old pot, and this isn't a house plant. It stays in my greenhouse in the winter and it comes out in the summer. It's a sticks on fire euphorbia, and it's beautiful. And it's in a very large Guy Wolf pot that I got from online I'm not going to tell people where I got it. But anyway, it's a big, beautiful pot, and I will be putting that sucker on an appliance dolly. Or my dolly.
Yeah, and if you don't have an appliance dolly, just be really careful and get somebody to help you with the big pots because, believe it or not, I've smashed a big pot accidentally by trying to move it myself. That wasn't very fun.
And if you smash it on your big toe, it's even less fun. Or if you knock your back out, not fun again. So there's certain ones you won't take outside. I'll be honest, I don't take that many of mine outside because I don't want to deal with the critters that hitchhike when they come back in. But we'll talk about that more in the summer when we say bring them back inside.
Yeah. And I have one more tip before we go on to the next thing, and that is pot feet. It often helps to elevate the pot above, like if you have a wood deck, you can buy little pot feet or something just so that it's not sitting on the wood because that tends to hold moisture on the wood, which is bad. And so
for your deck.
So raise it up if you can so that it can freely drain.
Right. And right now I need to get some more pot feet that actually work. I had some that were really hard to use, and it's also time to set up my watering system for my pots outside too. Right now I've been watering them myself.
Okay.
So you ready for our next quote?
I am. We will leave people breathless with anticipation about how to bring plants in, which we will not cover till August.
Okay. Gardening is learning, learning, learning. That's the fun of them. You're always learning. Helen Mirren. So this quote bothered me because she says that's the fun of them, and that's plural and gardening is singular. But I went back and found the quote, and it looks like where it actually is from. And it looks like she was talking about gardens. That's the fun of gardens. You're
Right.
always learning.
Always learning. And one of the things new gardeners especially learn is there's a lot of myths out on the internet.
Yeah, I want to say gardening in the 1970s was the golden age of gardening myths.
That's when the people really latched hold of them.
I think there were a lot of people that were out there spreading them, and they sounded good. Jerry Baker would have been one of them. And yeah, there are some really bad myths. So let's start with our first myth.
So the first myth is that if you plant a hot pepper next to a sweet pepper, the sweet pepper will be too hot and the hot pepper will be too tame.
No.
No, absolutely not. No.
You can grow sweet peppers right next to hot peppers. It doesn't matter. And because when the bees are doing the pollination for you, or whatever is pollinating your pepper plants, it might affect the seeds for the following year if you save seeds, but you wouldn't get the seeds. Okay, I don't know if I'm explaining this very well. So if you have two peppers next to each other, like say you have a fish pepper next to a confetti pepper. Fish peppers are hot. Confetti peppers are not. They both have variegated leaves, but there's no telling what you're going to get the following year if you saved seeds from these.
Right.
For a lot of reasons.
Right. And so if you're going to be a seed saver, we're not even going to go down that path. There's a certain distance you need to have between varieties to ensure blah, blah, blah. But just if you have two pepper plants, one hot and one sweet, plant them right next to each other and they'll be fine. You'll get good taste from both.
It won't hurt them. And also don't try to collect seeds from hybrid peppers, because if you do decide to collect seeds, use heirlooms. That's all I'm going to say about that. So then other false thing about peppers is a really, really good one.
Yeah. That there are male sweet peppers and female sweet peppers, and it's the number of bumps on the bottom. So, and I forget whether they say the males have 3 and the females have 4 or vice versa. But it is the most bogus thing I've ever heard, and people believe it.
People ask me that question all the time. I mean, I get that one at least once every pepper season, and I don't know why people care anyway. I mean, they're all female. They're fruits, right?
They're not male or female. It's fruit.
It's fruit, so it doesn't matter, right?
No.
So I'm sorry. I'm just trying to think, and somebody sent in a text while I was thinking on my computer. Okay, so it doesn't matter. They taste the same. They're just a pepper. Don't worry about it. I think this myth came out of some cooking videos, because that's where I traced it down to, because I could not figure out where it came from, because no good gardening expert that I know would tell people that.
But I've had people ask me about it, and I'm like, huh?
Every
What?
time. Yeah.
So the other myth is the myth that Epsom salts cure everything in the garden. Oh my gosh.
Epsom salts should be used for your bath when you come in from the garden, because you are achy and sore. And Epsom salts are a nice thing to sit in.
But they're basically magnesium sulfate. And so where they have used them in the garden is if you had a soil test and you said, oh, I'm short of magnesium in my soil, which I don't think any soil test ever has shown. That's when you would apply Epsom salts.
This was a really big thing, especially for tomato plants. I've seen more videos about Epsom salts and tomato plants than I ever want to see again.
Epsom salts in roses, Epsom salts all over the place. And
don't use Epsom salts.
I spoke last fall and somebody asked me about putting Epsom salts for their tomatoes. And I just looked at it and I says, there's no science there. She felt crushed.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Well, I think people hear this from like grandma or, their great aunt who gardens. And so they think it's like gospel because, they've been lifelong gardeners. So it's got to be true.
Well, I can see that too. I can see that. But it's not necessary. It's not true. Don't put Epsom salts in your garden, and don't use other household cleaners.
Right. Don't look under the kitchen sink for what ails your garden, the cure. It's not under your kitchen sink. It's not in the bathroom.
And you can make soap sprays. You can make hot pepper sprays and garlic sprays. You can do those things, but they're a lot of work, and there are better organic methods on the market that you can just order. and have sent to your house if you actually need them.
Right. And you know what really kind of slays me?
No.
And, there's a lot of sites, especially on Facebook, where people are wanting gardening advice.
Yep.
And so, I've seen people like, I've heard you should do Epsom salts. And then the next person says, oh, yeah, it's the greatest thing ever. And then the next person puts out a link to an article that totally debunks it. And then instead of saying, oh, okay, my bad, then they want to argue science.
Oh, what does that sound like? Everybody's arguing science about other things too. Science is pretty good and it's always evolving and we learn more and more. But most of the gardening science, there's that really good book. What is that really good book by that guy who's about where he takes all those myths and he debunks them? Gardening remedies, natural garden remedies. Oh, we'll look it up. I'll look it up for next week. I'll look it up as soon as this episode is over because I know where it is on my bookshelf, but it's in the other room.
Yeah, and there's another book by C.L. Fenari, Coffee for Roses.
It's a good one too.
Where she goes through all those old gardening myths and she tells you whether it's true or not. It was published several years ago. I'm sure you can still get it, but that's also a good one. We'll put a link to that in the show notes.
Okay, sounds great.
Speaking of which, let's go to the bookshelf, and I found a quote for it. Visiting gardens is bad for you. Not only does it encourage too much eating of cake, but sets up all kinds of false notions that are ruinous to your garden back home. Monty Don again. And you have visited gardens in England and everybody serves you cake.
A cake and elderberry cordial, which is delightful. And I mean, used to be I was safe from cake because I'm gluten-free and I have been for 13 years. So, when you go here, nobody has any gluten-free anything unless they know you well and love you. But in England, there are so many people who are gluten-free that they make gluten-free cake when you come visit too. The last trip I was on, we visited 3 gardens a day and we had cake in at least one of them, sometimes 2, because it was during the National Gardening Scheme. And they love to make cake for you during that because you give a donation and that donation goes to their hospitals and other worthwhile charities. I ate so much cake, I gained 5 pounds on that trip.
Oh my gosh, even with all the walking and everything.
Even
Crazy.
with all the walking and everything. And the other part that he's talking about is comparing your garden to other people.
Right.
Don't compare it to other people's gardens because everybody's garden's different. Everybody's garden. Refer back to the first quote in the episode.
So the book that we have chosen today is called The Garden Tourist, 120 Destination Gardens and Nurseries in the Northeast by Jana Milbacher, whom we know through GardenCom.
We do know her through GardenCom, and you might be wondering, why would we be suggesting a book for the northeastern part of the United States? Because when we all get out of our houses and get to actually go somewhere far again, maybe people don't want to get on planes yet, but they just want to take a driving trip. That would be a great driving trip. This is a good book.
Yes, and here's what I liked about it, Dee. She has not only thorough descriptions of the gardens and nurseries you can visit, but she also has these one-day itineraries. So if you wanted to take off on a Saturday or a Tuesday, for a day, she kind of gives you an itinerary to follow. And in the Northeast, everything's kind of close together, I guess. So you could just take one of those itineraries once things kind of open up and get yourself out of your own garden and go see some stuff.
Yes, and when the northeastern gardens are at their peak, Oklahoma's going through its really dry spell. So that would be a good time to go, too, from here.
So we do have a tip for people, though.
Call first.
Call first. You got to, no telling if something's open or not, or if the hours have changed. And she's got a lot of good information in the book, but I would definitely call ahead before I got in a car and drove 3 hours and found out that, we're closed. We're only going to open on these days.
Right. Because everything's changed right now. I will say Google is doing a pretty good job of keeping up with this too. So at our house, before we go to a restaurant to get takeout food, we Google it. We look at Google's version of the hours and then we call too, just to be sure.
Right. And back in the day before the internets was the big deal.
Yep.
I bet you did this too. When I would go to a city that I hadn't been to before, the first thing I would do when I get to the hotel would be pull out the phone book that was in the hotel room with the yellow pages and look up gardens and nurseries to see if I could sneak in a trip to a garden, even if I was there for business. See if I could sneak in a trip to a garden or a nursery sometime.
That's a great idea.
They don't have yellow pages in hotel rooms anymore.
Well, and you wouldn't want to touch them right now anyway.
No, but you could look it up on the internet. And that,
Yes,
of course,
on your
today,
phone.
today I look it up to see what's going to be there if I'm going to be there.
Me too. So our last quote is, "The hum of the bees is the voice of the garden." That's beautiful.
Elizabeth Lawrence, our favorite. So Dee, I'm going to let you take this one away, because this is, oh my gosh.
Okay, so there's been all these memes on the internet about 2020, what could be next, and then they show a picture of the murder hornet. So the murder hornet is known as the Asian giant hornet or the Japanese giant hornet. It's Vespa mandarinia, and it has been all the talk on social media, all because of a New York Times article which talked about the fact that the hornet has been spotted in Washington State. They have seen 2 nests, and I think they've eradicated both of those. But where you see 2 nests, there are probably more hornets. And so that article made it sound like all is lost, doom and gloom. And I actually posted that article on my timeline, and then I took it down because people were kind of freaking out. And then I posted another one, which was from the Valhalla Organics blog. And they talked about not only the hornet, but what is being done to counteract it. And there's quite a few things. Those hornets are huge, and don't go see that video if you don't want to see a bunch of horror. Don't go look at that video on YouTube where the hornet gets into a beehive, because you'll think all is lost and the end of the world is coming. And we don't need that right now.
We do not.
The European honeybee is the honeybee that's been in the United States since the 1700s. Colonists brought it with them when they came here. It has changed over the years, and it changes all the time. And there are people who say that because it's been here so long, it's an adapted bee, like an adapted plant.
Right.
It has no defenses against this hornet because it didn't grow up in Asia. Its genetics aren't from Asia. The interesting thing, and this is a fun video to go watch, is the one where Asian honeybees ball said hornet. And that's where they all get together, bully up on the hornet, not try to sting it, but they just do a heat thing. It's the same thing that they do to their queens when the queens are too old. And so they basically just heat it up to too high of a temperature and it dies. And so the European honeybee still tries to sting it. So what's being done to counteract it in Washington State? One of the things is they're putting mouse guards on their beehives. And mouse guards is a metal piece that goes across the front of the hive, and you screw it in with screws. Now, maybe you guys don't care about honeybees. Maybe you're scared to death that it kills 50 people a year in Asia. Yeah, well, I mean, you would have to go up by its nest. And most of the United States isn't heavily forested and nice and cool and has mountains. But what state is, Carol?
Washington State.
Which is why it ended up there first. Also the fact that it's on the coast. So try not to worry too much about the Asian giant hornet, and don't confuse them with bumblebees. There's been a big problem in Washington State and Oregon with people killing bumblebees. And bumblebees are endangered already, and they're native to the United States. And they will not bother you. They don't even defend their nest. So don't kill bumblebees.
Don't kill cicada killers. It's a wasp.
Yes, you talk a little bit about the cicada killers. They're huge.
Cicada killers are the largest wasps, as we've talked about. No, we haven't talked about those.
Yeah, a little bit. We have once a little bit about them.
Right. And
we didn't feature them.
They will not. The chances of you knowing somebody that got stung by a cicada killer is pretty nil, though I personally have known somebody got stung by a cicada killer, but the cicada killer wasp accidentally flew up my sister's skirt, and she freaked out, and it freaked out, and it happened to be the female that has the stinger. Anyway, long story, the cicada killers are not going to hurt you. Don't worry about them.
Mm-mm. Yeah, you will see them, at least in my state, in the middle of summertime, and they fly low to the ground, and they fly in kind of a zigzag pattern, and they look fierce. Don't confuse them with the Asian giant hornet, because that's not what they are. They're a native hornet to the United States. They do not defend their nest. They are looking for cicadas to kill, and goodness knows we have plenty of cicadas in Oklahoma.
The other thing, just before we finish this little piece up, Dee, is somebody said that they saw a picture of a praying mantis that was eating an giant Asian hornet, whatever those Asian giant hornet.
Yeah, our friend Marianne Newcomer saw it, and she said that it was a bit of good news that day. Brutal, but good. Once again, nature is brutal, and I say go praying mantids or mantises. What is the plural? I don't know.
Praying mantid is singular, and praying mantis is plural, or vice versa.
There we go. So, and we aren't going to get into the fact that we have some Asian ones of those here in the United States now. The truth of the matter is, just like everything in the world, we go back and forth between all the countries now, so things are going to get here. But remember back when killer bees was such a thing in the 1970s and early 80s?
Yeah.
And everybody was terrified.
Right. And nothing happened.
The killer bees have almost just gone away, except for in Arizona and New Mexico and parts of southern Texas. But as they go further north, they can't live because it's too cold for them. So, and even in Arizona and New Mexico, they don't really usually come into the towns. So it ended up being a bunch of hoopla for nothing. And we're going to say the same thing about the Asian giant hornet. For now, there's only 2, and they're in Washington State. And they were annihilated, and there might be a couple more.
Right. And so we talked about it being too cold. It's too cold. Let's wrap up. Circle right back where we started. It's cold out there. Let's go ahead and wrap up. So we want to thank you for listening to The Garden Angelus. If you like our podcast, please tell your friends about us.
And if you listen on Apple Podcasts, we'd love a 5-star review. That helps us get noticed by the algorithm and by other people. And we've had some really nice reviews lately that have warmed our hearts.
Yes. And be sure and check out our show notes for links for more information about today's topics, plus links to our own websites.
It was lovely to chat with you over the Garden Gate today. Bye until next week.
Bye.